Hello, everybody. Do you know what school you're at? You know this is School of the East? Hmm? You know what the name of your class is? Right? Okay. You know what week this is? Third week. Hope everybody's doing okay. I have to address some things for you. Unfortunately, some students, and I know the office advised you, so I have to go over this again, that some students have said, I didn't know I was supposed to do any work, or I didn't know I was supposed to answer the questions or send the email to the teacher, even though all those things were provided, and that's what we do in my class, right? Most of you have had me for many quarters, and you know that I write the questions on the board after we go through a reading. Here, you know, in the computer, we're doing it as a lecture, so you can be at home and relax and wear comfortable clothing and things like that. But you do have responsibilities as students, just like when you come to the classroom. You pay attention. Sometimes if I ask you to read, hopefully you read for me. And then I write the questions on the board. I ask for volunteers. You come up and write them. And keep your papers and notes. Because later, after so many weeks, usually the fourth week, I do a review, get you ready for the test. And then the fifth week, we take our midterm, right? So nothing's changed there. So it's kind of mysterious, students, after a few weeks later, was I supposed to do something, right? Obviously, I don't see you in class. So I have no way of knowing who is actually watching my recording and listening and, hopefully learning some stuff. So the only way we can do that is when you send your email answers to my questions back to my email. That's how we're conducting attendance. So if you don't do that, you're going to be counted as absent. I mean, you have responsibility, you agree, correct? So you need to do it on a timely manner, right? This lesson is going to be sent out tomorrow on Monday. Hopefully you enjoy it. That's the third week. That's not the time to send the first week's answers that you made for the questions, right? Nor is it time for the second week's. Right? So again, a lot of students, some students, they sent the questions and answers right away. They were fantastic. Other students, I don't know what was going on there, but you need to do it on a timely manner. So again, let me mention this to you. You're going to be looking at this on Monday. Let me look at the calendar to be sure. You don't have to believe me, right? The 27th. So I will give you until Thursday. It's many days, and you will have access to the lecture to look at it, read it, turn my voice off, whatever you want to do. That's one night, 2 nights, 3 nights, 4 nights that you can go over it and send me the answers. If you send them to me on Friday, you are late. I have to mark you down as late. And then if you send it to me on the following weekend, I'm gonna put you as absent, right? Because then I'm making the fourth week's video and lecture and questions for you, right? I have to stay on a schedule, and so should you, right? Again, this is the only responsibility for you to stay home, enjoy the class, dressed in your comfortable clothes, drinking your, favorite soda or whatever you drink. So you have to turn those in, right? So again, you'll be looking at this on Monday, the 27th of April. You have until Thursday evening, which will be the 30th, last day of the month. You send it to me on Friday because you've been sleeping the whole week. I'm going to put you down as late. You send it to me on the weekend or after, like the following Monday or something, when we're doing the fourth lesson and the review, you're absent. That's all there is to it. So Now that I've stated that, and that's very, very clear, so students don't call the office or send me emails. I don't know what's going on. Why? Well, I haven't looked at the lectures for 3 weeks. Well, that's your answer right there. So that's where we are. Okay, I've given you dates and times and deadlines. So that's how we're going to do it. Otherwise, I have no way to know if you're present. You have to be present by observing the lecture and then sending me the answers to the questions. Okay. I've got my responsibilities to the office, and you guys have your responsibility to the office and me in the classroom. So that's how it's done. So now I'm going to get to this long and little tricky lecture, but hopefully it's fun with enough information there for you that you can enjoy it with some easy, straightforward questions for you and answers. Nothing too complicated. Okay. All right. So let me go to the lecture material. Okay, week 3, again, it's week 3. Repeating what the office has told me to do for your benefit, not to wake up suddenly and say, I didn't know I had to do work. You know, when the teacher writes all those questions from the lecture, 10 to 15 questions, was I supposed to pay attention to those? Yes, you were, just like my class. We had the same routine. I didn't want to change it for you guys. Okay, so again, Humanities 101, School of the East, Monday afternoon, 12:30 to 4:30, if we were in school. This is spring quarter 2020, Civilization of the West. Okay. This week we're starting with Spain. Okay. So, North African Muslims invaded the Iberian Peninsula in the early 700s, and controlled much of the territory for more than 700 years. It was only toward the end of the Middle Ages that Christian armies began to drive them from power. During the 1400s, the expansion of the Spanish military led to success in the venture. The retaking of the lands that would eventually become the nations of Portugal and Spain is known as the Reconquista. So again, the Iberian Peninsula is modern day Spain and Portugal. And if you know your geography, Spain is shaped kind of like a box, and Portugal's attached to it, kind of like the shape of California. So that was what's called the Iberian Peninsula, right? And it was controlled by the Muslims that came up from North Africa, the Morocco area, right underneath, for 700 years, enforcing their Islamic rule over a Christian country. Okay? And, that's what you need to know there, until Spanish had a strong enough military to kick them out and retake their homelands. Okay? So I will continue. At this time, Spain was not a unified nation, but a collection of principalities. The two strongest were Aragon in western Spain and Castile in eastern Spain. Each of these provinces had annexed others until they achieved the status of kingdoms. In 1469, Ferdinand of Aragon married Isabel of Castile, uniting the crowns and consolidating Spanish power. Both were monarchs in their own right, but there was no European tradition of female monarchs. Therefore, Isabel considered it politically expedient to share some of her authority with Ferdinand. Isabel was Queen of Castile, where Ferdinand had limited authority, but could not act without her counsel and consent. Ferdinand was King of Aragon, where Isabel had no power or authority except as his consort. So again, it says, at the top, going over vocab, Spain was not a unified nation, but a collection of principalities. So that's similar. Temujin knows. He's the leader of my Mongolian troop there. Before Genghis Khan united Mongolia and made it a country, it was a collection of different tribes of people that he unified together. It made a one Mongolia. So it's the same thing here, except we had little larger areas that we talk about principalities, whereas in Mongolia, we're talking about groups of people. Okay. When you annex something, is that you, in other words, when a country annexes another country, it makes it part of its own country. Hitler did that during World War II. He had Germany, and then he said that, or he was actually from, if you didn't know that Hitler was not actually from Germany, he was from Austria. But it had a higher percentage of Germans there, so he said, this belongs to Germany, so we will annex you. That's what was happening here until they made a larger Spain. Okay. Monarch is another word for king or queen, either way. But you see, there was no European tradition of female monarchs or queens at the time, so that was a new thing. Okay, so let me finish off the bottom here. The major goal of the Spanish monarchs can be summed up or listed in one word: control. So number one, control, and usually that's what it is with any country. Control over the nobility, which is the royalty, would make their position on the throne secure. Control over the population, meaning the citizens, would prevent any threats of uprising, which means attacks against the government, or civil war. Control over other Spanish provinces would unite the kingdom and give the monarchs greater power and authority in Europe. Right now, in present day, people are getting very worried. For us, I mean, if I can relate this to us in the present time, the longer these lockdowns that certain states, in California, we've got one of the most severe, like New York, severe lockdowns. You can't go here, you can't go there. Nobody's going back to work except nurses and things like that. The longer they do that and people can't pay their rent or lose their homes, lose their cars, they're afraid of people having some kind of uprising. People are already protesting. So the next thing is an actual uprising where they just ignore the law and do what they want to do, right? So we can compare that to now in a certain sense right now. People don't want those uprisings. People want everything to be calm and cool. But as you see in history, they can happen. Okay. Continue. Okay, control of the nobility. So we'll go into each individual situation. Relations between the Spanish monarchy, king and queen now, and the aristocracy, the high-level people, were based on an exchange of favors for loyalty. The monarch needed to control the hereditary nobles, quelling or stopping any desire they might have to depose, assassinate, or rise up against the royal authority. On their side, the nobles depended on the monarch for privileges. Isabel and Ferdinand offered the nobles major privileges, salaried offices, and the titles that accompanied them, substantial rewards for military service, and grants of land that they could pass on to their heirs. In exchange, the Spanish nobles were remarkably loyal to the throne, as was usual in an absolute monarchy. The nobles were conservative, with no incentive to alter a system that brought them rich rewards in return for relatively little support. So going over the vocab, it's already stated this aristocracy did things and gave loyalty for privileges. Okay? Substantial rewards means a lot or high level. Okay, it says military service, so if you got in there, you'd probably get a very high rank. much higher than something like a sergeant. Grants of land. So you get these nice areas of land and you could pass them on to your heirs or your children. And this made these nobles remarkably loyal to the throne, meaning the king, as was usual in an absolute monarchy. So at the end, when it says they were conservative with no incentive means no desire. So even if there were bad things in that system for the majority of the people, they didn't care. They don't want to change it. Why? Because they're living a privileged life. So if you're there and you're a regular guy and you say, you know, they're overcharging me in tax and the price of food is too high and then the penalties are too severe, and you go to your local noble, they're not going to go talk to the king for you and tell him that people are complaining because they don't want to lose their position. They don't have your problems. They're living in a beautiful home and they have large land. They've got great salaries. So, you know, and again, putting that to now, if you're upset with different things here now, your local political people are really not going to listen to you if it's going to endanger their positions and the privileged life that they live. They don't really care whatever your issue is. Koreatown just had an issue last year, and the folks living in Koreatown fought really hard because the local government just wanted to say, hey, we're just going to put a big area here and house a lot of homeless here in K-Town, and we don't care what you think. And the Korean people protested and said, we don't want this here. You have to give us good reason why this should be here or why you can't put it someplace else. So luckily they fought, but who knows in the future. In this situation, the people could not really go against. But the same thing is at first, the local congressman there in Koreatown didn't want to hear Korean people's complaints because if it didn't go through, he's not going to get his money and he might lose his position. So he doesn't really care. So ending the page, control of the people. In 1478, Isabel and Ferdinand established the Spanish Inquisition. That's something you should remember. That's something American kids can't forget from. They might not know, remember the other things that happened, but you just say the word Spanish Inquisition and right away, oh, scary stuff. Which reported directly to the monarch. So again, just directly to the king rather than operating under the authority of the church. So people could not even go complain to the church. So although the Muslims had been driven from power, many Muslims still lived in Spain. The peninsula also had a substantial Jewish population. The monarchs believed that for the good of the state, the people should all have the same faith. This would prevent civil unrest, again, people protesting, maybe rioting in the streets, conflicts, and possible uprisings. A homogeneous nation, meaning just one thing, whether it's a religion or a group of people, according to the monarch's way of thinking, would be more peaceful. So I think you know what's probably going to happen next, or what I'm going to read about next. So we're at the end of 41. So let me put the questions up from there. Go to the famous whiteboard here. Okay. Okay, write my first question. Okay, first question. What kind of country was Spain at this time? Okay, what kind of country was it? So that's the first thing that we read at the top, so you should be able to find that. I can't really give you a hint on this one without giving you the answer, but I did make a comparison between the time of Genghis Khan in Mongolia. So that was my comparison for this one. And again, we're talking about the beginning of Spain. Okay. So 2. Okay, what was the goal of Spanish monarchs at this time? Again, I've said it a number of times. If you've forgotten, Spanish monarchs are kings and queens, right? Originally just kings. And basically, it's just common sense. Any country that has kings or queens, they're really looking for one most important thing. So knowing that, you should be able to get that question answered very easily. Okay. So the next one. Okay, 3. Why were Spanish nobles loyal to the throne? We all know that people don't usually do things for free, right? Or just because. So knowing that, you should be able to answer why they were so loyal to the king. Not just because they were great guys, right? Has to be a reason with humans. And the last question for page 41. Who established the Spanish Inquisition? Right. There's that scary word I mentioned to you before that American high school kids will remember this term. So, but who established or who started the Spanish Inquisition? Right? Was it Ricky Martin? Was it Menudo? I don't think so. So I'll give you a few minutes to answer these before I erase. Because again, I don't want students complaining. You erase them too quickly. I was sleeping for the first 3 questions. I just woke up. So take your time, answer these 4 questions, and we'll be done with the first page. Okay? So they're pretty good questions here. All right? And again, this is the 3rd week lesson. Hopefully, you will not send me the answers to the 3rd week's questions on the 6th week. Right? Unless, like your Purvey, I know he's a brain surgeon, and Purvey, you know, he has many patients that he has to perform surgeries on, so he might not be able to answer the questions for 3 weeks, right? Okay, so I'm going to pull out the eraser. And I'm going to go to 1, say goodbye to 1, goodbye to 2, goodbye to 3, and goodbye to 4. And then let me go back to the lecture. Okay, so we finished reading Control of the People, so we shall move on. Again, this is where it's going to start getting juicy here, like I said. Okay. Jews and Muslims were faced with three choices. First choice, convert to Christianity, right? By choice, not force. You have to say, hey, we all know convert. You leave your religion for another religion. A lot of times that happens in marriages. A man falls in love. He might be a Christian or have no religion here in the United States. He marries a nice Jewish girl. She says, I need you to convert to my religion. And he does, because he loves her. I worked with a lady that she was an American gal, and she married a guy from Algeria, Morocco, and he was a Muslim. And she, agreed to take his faith for him because she loved him. So, but here we're talking about from the government in the state. So, convert by force, which means the government will tell you, you better become a Christian now, or leave the country. They give you a free pass to leave, which I guess is more than what Kim Jong-un will do, because he doesn't let anybody leave. That's too bad. But I'm sure if he said anybody can leave who they want to, maybe half of the people would leave his country. So there you go. In 1492, all Jews were ordered to convert or leave Spain. In 1499, the same order was issued against Muslims. Naturally, many Jews and Muslims chose to convert, which means they were happy they're living in Spain and maybe had no place else to go. So that's their only option. So they chose to convert, not wishing to give up home, friends, livelihood, and family. They remain objects of suspicion in the eyes of the Inquisition, which questioned the sincerity of their conversions by Spanish law. It was a crime to practice any non-Christian religion, even in the privacy of one's home. If someone observed that the Jewish converts next door never ate pork, for example, the neighbor could denounce the family to the Inquisition on suspicion of practicing Judaism, right? Because Christians have no barrier or taboo in eating pork. But if they were watching these Jewish folks who said they were Christians now, not eating pork or refusing it, then they probably are still practicing Judaism. The Inquisition would arrest such people, then use a variety of interrogation techniques to find the facts, and you will learn what these things were. In cases of high crimes, the inquisitors, or the people asking the questions, used torture, which had been standard under the Roman laws of the old Roman Empire, on which the Inquisition was based. The Inquisition was an enormously effective royal tool for maintaining control by force. I can give you a similar type of example of that if you're confused about effective tool for maintaining control by means of fear. In Saudi Arabia, just common theft, they will cut off your right hand. So they do not have a lot of theft there because people are afraid of getting their right hand cut off. There was something that I learned a lot later. As a typical American, never been to Saudi Arabia. I didn't know that there was a reason why they cut off the right hand. In their culture, the right hand is your eating hand. So by cutting off your right hand, not only do people look and see that you're missing your hand and that, yes, you were a thief and you can never lie your way out of that, they also know now that you are eating with your left hand, and the left hand was the hand used to clean your behind after you go to do number 2. So for them, that was quite an embarrassment that you now have to use your cleaning hand to eat with, right? So that was something I didn't know until later, right? And they still also cut people's heads off. So when people see that, because they do it in the public, most people don't want to steal or rape or do bad things, right? So they're also a way of maintaining control of the population by fear, right? Okay, control of the lands. In 1492, the Spanish army completed the Reconquista. Reconquista in Spanish means reconquer, by capturing Granada, which is a big city in Spain, the last Muslim stronghold. So that's the last city that had a large Muslim population that I guess were fighting against Spain, did not want to go back to North Africa. With the war over, Isabel could turn her attention to her long-standing interest in establishing a viable sea route to Asia. Her sponsorship of the first voyage of Christopher Columbus marked the beginning of the cultural exchange between Europe and the Americas. After Isabel's death, Ferdinand continued to acquire more land. He annexed provinces, so I went over annexed before, in Italy and France, and even expanded as far as Oran in North Africa. Isabel and Ferdinand cemented, or as we say, established important foreign alliances by arranging dynastic marriages for their children. And this was quite common in Europe. Princess Catherine of Aragon married Arthur of England, and that's to maintain some kind of peace. When he died, he married, or she married, his younger brother Henry, who would rule as Henry VIII. So Henry had a Spanish wife, even though he was English. Princess Juana married Philip of Ghent, sometimes called Philip the Handsome, good for her, son of Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I. By birth, Philip would inherit all the considerable Habsburg lands in Central Europe. He was also the likely successor to his father as Holy Roman Empire. So as I go back on the vocab here, looks pretty straightforward. I've gone over most of these terms. So I guess nothing too complicated there. I will go on to the questions for page 42. So back to the whiteboard. Okay. My next question. Okay. Which groups were affected by this? Okay, so again, if I have a student that has just woken up, it's not sure what's going on. This pertains to question 4, which was our first page. There were 4 questions on 41. And the last question on that page was, who established the Spanish Inquisition? So you give me the answer for that. So this one is connected to 4. So who or which groups were affected by the Spanish Inquisition, right? Yeah. And again, at the end of our reading there, if you're a little confused there, or like, well, I don't think that happened in Asia with those, what were called dynastic marriages. Yes, they did. For example, Mongolia invaded Korea twice. And to keep the peace and lessen the fighting, A lot of beautiful Korean princesses were married to Mongolian princes and sailed to Mongolia to be with them. So those marriages, the same thing, to keep the peace and not have any type of fighting. So those things also happened in Asia. Next question. Okay, 6. Continuing with the theme of the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition. The Inquisition was very effective for what? Right, and we read this at the end of the reading. So it was very effective for stopping certain things. Could it be smoking, the drinking of alcohol? Or like what the mayor tried to do in New York, the stopping of people getting giant Slurpees because it's too much sugar in a giant drink. So let me know. I have a feeling the answer is a lot more interesting than not being able to buy a supersized drink or a large Slurpee, extra large. Okay. Then on to our last question for this page. We'll have one less than the first set. Okay, 7. Where was the last Muslim stronghold in Spain? Again, stronghold means an area where people are fighting to continue to maintain power or a location there. So we know that Spain eventually kicked out the Muslims after 700 years, but there was one area that was the strongest and it was the last one to fall. So you have to pick an area. So all I'll tell you is it's a city. So you need to tell me the city name, right? It's not Hollywood. It's not WeHo or NoHo. But it's funny, now that I see this word stronghold, well, first, okay, I'll give you a few minutes, write down these questions, and I'll tell you a little story. So again, write down your questions. Which groups were affected by this? The Inquisition was very effective for what? And where was the last Muslim stronghold? I remember now, my favorite restaurant in Jeju-do, Korea. For the Korean folks who are not, or the people who are not Korean, it's an island known as the Honeymoon Island. My favorite, I think it's a 2-story restaurant, is called the Stronghold. So my Korean students, if you go to Jeju-do, look for the Stronghold. It's a pretty cool place. It's got a great view of the city. Okay. I always was confused and called it the Lockdown. I don't know why, but it's a Stronghold. We got the lockdown here in LA. Okay, so let me go to the eraser. Erase the first, which groups? Bye-bye. 6 or 6. It's about Spain. I should be speaking in Spanish, right? Número 7, a borrar, which means to erase. Bye-bye. Okay, back to that interesting lecture. Okay. Okay. All right. So let me see here. Let me make sure I'm matching this correctly. Control the lands, which I read. So that means we should go to the next one. Spain in the 1500s. Queen Isabel died in 1504. Although Juana inherited the throne of Castile, she was not mentally or emotionally stable enough to perform her duties. Knowing of her daughter's condition, Isabel had arranged for Ferdinand to serve as regent until Juana's son, Charles of Ghent, born in 1500, was old enough to rule. Continuing, Ferdinand died in 1516 on his grandfather's death. Charles of Ghent inherited both Castile and Aragon and was crowned King Charles I of Spain. He also inherited all Habsburg lands in Central Europe, which put him in possession of more territory than any one individual had ever ruled in Europe. Wow, a lot of territory. At first, Charles was much more interested in the Holy Roman Empire than in Spain. His Spanish subjects interpreted his long absences as disrespect and rebelled. Once his loyal supporters had put down the rebellion, Charles agreed to reform his habits. He returned to Spain and remained there for the balance of his life, overseeing his responsibilities as his subjects had expected. So again, that part looks pretty straightforward. I don't see really any new words, so I will continue. Charles had several sisters, all of whom married heirs to various thrones in Denmark, Hungary, Portugal, and France. So see, all these sisters marry a prince from every one of these different countries, and it helps to have peace. These marriages solidified alliances between Spain and these European states. In 1519, he was elected Holy Roman Emperor, making him Charles I of Spain and Charles V of Germany. A devout Catholic, which means a very strong and practicing Catholic. You might know a Catholic that rarely goes to church and doesn't read the Bible, so they're not a devout Catholic. A person that always goes to church and reads the Bible and does the things that the person needs to do, you can call them devout. So a devout Catholic, like all the Spanish monarchs, Charles engaged in a series of wars to try to wipe out Protestantism, that's their enemy, and reunite Europe under the Catholic faith. These efforts were costly, time-consuming, and ultimately unsuccessful. With the Peace of Augsburg of 1555, which established that each elector in the empire could choose the religion of his own state, Charles abdicated, which means he gave up the throne. Again, relating that to modern times, who's the man who married Meghan Markle, the B-level actress? Well, Prince Harry. And he abdicated his title for love to be with her. So he's no longer the prince. And he even gave up his military titles. The things men will do for love. Wow. He turned the Holy Roman Empire over to his brother, Ferdinand, and abdicated the throne of Spain in favor of his son, Philip, who would rule as Philip II. Okay? So I've got to continue to get to the bottom of this page so we can start the questions here. So let me go on. Again, everything pretty straightforward on the vocabulary. Okay, Philip II and the fall of Spain. Philip II inherited perhaps the most prosperous and powerful kingdom in Europe. By the 1500s, Spain boasted a thriving wool industry. Thriving means it's very, very successful and busy. I mentioned it to the class yesterday for the morning class. So many businesses I see have gone out of business during this lockdown, and many are suffering. If you watch the news, they've had many people, restaurant owners, and they'll be interviewed and say, "You're only doing takeout now. How much has this affected your profit?" And they'll tell you 90%. It's scary. But right now, the two places that I see that are thriving and always have lines and lines from the entrance to the street to the freeway are In-N-Out and Starbucks drive-through coffees. Not the Starbucks establishment. Some of those are actually closed, but the drive-throughs, oh my. I try to go up to the window and they pushed me away and said I have to answer an app. So their drive-through is just thriving at this time. So in Spain with the wool industry. A powerful navy, very powerful navy. A stable aristocracy, which means the nobility. They were very stable, not a lot of fighting. Religious unity, Catholicism. And great wealth coming from in the American colonies, Mexico, what is present-day Cuba, the Caribbean, things like that. They brought a lot of gold and money back to Europe and Spain. In addition, Philip's close family ties to several rulers in Austria and Central Europe created strong national alliances for Spain. By this time, Philip inherited the throne. Spain had reaped or gained tremendous profit from trade with its American colonies. Spain had always been a shipping economy since it had long stretches of coastline and its ships were accustomed to navigating the Mediterranean as well as the Atlantic. And they're talking about oceans there, folks. The high degree of maritime, which means naval skill, was one reason Spain had been the first nation to sponsor transatlantic voyages. Long 2-month trips in the ship. Philip established Spain's first national capital in the city of Cape Town. No, I'm sorry, Madrid, just joking. Until his accession to the throne, which means when he took the throne, the royal court had traveled throughout the provinces, settling first in one city, then in another. Philip, whose natural bent or desire was for, so we'll stop there because we're at the bottom, actually, of 43. And I've got questions to ask you, so let me go on to that. So hopefully everybody's enjoying these questions. Okay. Question 8. In 1516, who was crowned King of Spain? Okay. So there was a few names there, but we concentrate on who was crowned. I've had students that obviously didn't pay attention in class before, didn't study. So when it came to the test and I asked this question, which I probably will, and again, you'll see I'm applying or giving you the date. I'm not asking you, I could have said, who was crowned king of Spain? But I'm telling you, in 1516. But the student who didn't study and didn't pay attention put, why, Burger King, of course. No, that was not the king of Spain in 1516. So don't write something silly like that, okay? Just to let you know. Temujin might do something like that. He's a funny guy. So, okay, next question. Okay. Why did Charles I engage in a series of wars in Europe? Right? Why did any king engage in wars? There's usually the similar meanings why or reasons why they engage in wars. Some kind of benefit, right? Obviously. So that's how you'll, if you use common sense, you'll find an answer there for that. Last question for 43. Okay, our last question for page 43. Give some reasons why Spain in the 1500s was the most prosperous kingdom. Another way to say prosperous is wealthy in Europe. Again, this is a good practice question for your test. As you see here, many times I'll give a question like this, and this one will probably show up on the midterm. Hint, hint, maybe. Give some reasons why Spain. So a student will only give me one. They'll answer it and they'll say, I'm done. But some means more than one, usually 2, 3, or 4. So again, as is my rule, if you give me one, I'll give you a small amount of points. If you give me 2, you get more. If you give me 3 or 4 or whatever is dictated, I will give you the most points. So again, your effort, the more you give an effort, the more you can gain points here, right? And again, hopefully you will not give me, comedy answers here on 10 because you're not sure, like why was Spain the most prosperous? Because they invented Taco Bell, which is not true. But some things the students have written on the test have been very funny. So it's not a comedy class. Sometimes I'll at least give you half a point if your comedy is funny. But just listen to my lecture and read and you'll be fine, right? Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes to answer those. There's 3 there. But remember, 10 is, 1 is not enough. 2 is probably not enough to give you the full points on question 10, okay? Wow, I think that was some Korean wine. I thought that was grape juice. Gotta be careful. Okay, we doing okay on those questions? Okay, I'm gonna start erasing. Hopefully everybody's comfortable at home. Okay. So 1516, who was crowned king of Spain? Who knows? Why did Charles I engage in a series of wars? He was bored. 10, give some reasons why Spain in the 1500s was the most prosperous kingdom in Europe. I don't know. I've had students say that too. I don't know. I wasn't alive in the 1500s. Okay, that doesn't give you points either. Bye-bye. Okay, back to the reading. Okay, so I had finished bent 4, and I have to finish the bottom of the page. Okay. All right, so Philip, whose natural bent was for administration rather than war, so this fellow liked the governing more than starting wars, like my question with Charles the First, preferred a stable working environment and thus a stationary court, or the court of his nobles. He chose Madrid because it had 2 advantages. First, it was centrally located in the realm. Realm is another word for kingdom. So centrally located. Like picking Seoul, centrally located in South Korea. Philip did not create regional rivalry among the more established centers of learning, industry, and culture. Had he chosen a city such as Seville, it might have created resentment among the wealthy residents of the cities he rejected. So again, people get jealous, people get upset. Like all Spanish monarchs, Philip was a devout Catholic. Unlike Henry IV of France, who had converted for reasons of political expediency, Philip had no religious tolerance in his nature. He refused to allow the practice of any religion except Catholicism anywhere in his realms. Including the distant American colonies. So again, even if you're over in Mexico, Cuba, what have you, you have to be a Catholic, and that's it. No other religions, please. Okay. So let me move over. The Holy Roman Empire. As you read earlier, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V was also King Charles I of Spain. Same guy, different titles. Charles divided his Spanish and Central European lands between 2 family members. His brother, Ferdinand, would rule the empire as Ferdinand I. Although the formal transfer of power did not take place until 1556, Ferdinand had already been ruling the Austrian Habsburg lands for 30 years. That's a long time back then. People didn't live that long, so he must have been very healthy. Ferdinand's major foreign policy goal was to withstand the constant threat of Turkish invasion. If you don't know that where Turkish people come from, it is from a country called Turkey. And to my knowledge, there's no Turkeys there. In 1529, the Turks under Suleiman the Magnificent laid siege to Vienna, which means they attacked it, and very successfully. The next 17 years saw repeated Turkish invasions that the Austrians managed to repel or fight against. However, the Turks could always be counted on to come back and try again. In 1547, a peace treaty divided Hungary into 3 zones: the Royal Hungary under Ferdinand's rule, Transylvania under its own rule, and the rest, the largest share, under Turkish rule. So just imagine your country, you know. Let's make it something like Korea, right? A third is controlled by Koreans, a third is controlled by China, and a third is controlled by Japan. That's what was going on here at this time. As Holy Roman Emperor and also King of Bohemia and Hungary, Ferdinand ruled over a diverse population that included ethnic Germans, Czechs, country later to be known as Czechoslovakia, which now does not exist. It's another Bosnia-Herzegovina, Poles from Poland, and Hungarians. His subjects were also religiously mixed, including both Lutherans and Catholics. Ferdinand believed that the only way to manage such a varied population was to maintain a centrally controlled, efficient civil service. He established 3 councils of government, 1 executive, 1 administrative, and 1 judicial. He retained the loyalty and cooperation of the great landlords by allowing them most of the responsibility for day-to-day government at the local level. He also allowed his subjects freedom of worship. As a Catholic, Ferdinand would have preferred to rule the Catholic realm, and as so that brings us to the bottom of 44. Things look pretty straightforward here. I don't see any big words, so I will proceed to the whiteboard. Okay, and luckily for this page, 44, there's only 2 questions. So here we go. Easy stuff. Easy stuff. Not here to overwhelm you. Okay. Which city was Spain's first capital? Okay. So it was not New York, was not Las Vegas, was not Tijuana. Okay. Which was Spain's first capital? Which city? Okay, the last question for this page. Yay, only 2 questions. You know we're getting close to the end when it start getting to 2. Okay. What was the only religion practiced at this time in Spain? We already know the reasons why, the legality of it. So, was it Hinduism? Was it Buddhism? What, or Shintoism maybe? What was the name of the religion, and only one allowed to technically be practiced at this time in Spain? Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes to get those 2. See, I actually had an extra question there. I wiped it out, so you're only going to get 2 there. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to erase these. I think I've given you enough time on those. So again, which city was Spain's first capital? Again, maybe it was Los Angeles. Okay, what was the only religion practiced at this time? Remember, they had a law, and there was only one religion to be practiced. Again, Temujin, I think it was Buddhism, but it could have been Shintoism. Okay, I'm not trying to give you the wrong answer, right? Just have you do your own work. Okay. So, I'm going to go back to the lecture. Okay. And we just finished the Holy Roman Empire. So let me go up top to the next page. Okay, continue. The Holy Roman Emperor, he was obliged to favor the Catholic cause. So oblige means kind of forced to. However, his attempts to do so involved persuasion rather than force, and he certainly preferred Lutheranism to the Islam practiced by the Turks. Like other successful monarchs of the 16th and 17th centuries, Ferdinand realized that no government would ultimately succeed in dictating the personal faith of its subjects. So, in other words, he's trying to say it's very, very difficult to control people and the faith that they choose, especially when you have different groups of people. Ferdinand I had laid the foundations of a united Austrian state, although he divided his lands among his sons on his death. In 1564, Austria would emerge from the 30 Years' War as a relatively strong, unified emperor. And I won't go into deeply the 30 Years' War because this week we're trying to concentrate on Spain. Okay, so we continue here. So England and the triumph of Protestantism. In 1553, Mary Tudor inherited the throne of England, succeeding her half-brother Edward VI. Like her Spanish mother, Catherine of Aragon, Mary was a Catholic. On assuming the throne, she restored Catholicism as the state religion. In 1554, she married Philip, her cousin. I hope he was a second cousin and not a first cousin. And fellow Catholic, and then heir to the throne of Spain. The marriage was highly unpopular in England because Philip was Catholic, foreign, and a father to a son from a previous marriage. The English did not welcome the idea of a foreign and Catholic heir. At age 37, Mary seemed unlikely to bear healthy children of her own. Wow. So even then, because now we talk about women in their 40s and that they shouldn't have kids. A lot of them are successful and they take certain drugs, but it's very high percentage that once a woman gets into her 40s, her eggs are weak and there's a high possibility of Down syndrome. And I personally know a couple that waited until the woman was in her early 40s, and unfortunately they had a baby, and the baby did get Down syndrome. So even at this time, the late, women thinking that women in their late 30s, it was dangerous. Wow. This marriage was purely an affair of state on Philip's side, occupied with military strategy and administrative tasks in Spain. He spent almost no time in England. Mary was given the nickname Bloody Mary, not because she drank Bloody Marys, which is tomato juice and vodka and other spices, for the number of Protestants who were executed during her reign. By her order, between 250 and 300 Protestants were executed or burned at the stake. Ooh, that's bad. However, due process of English law was observed in all cases. The accused were tried in court and executed. So supposedly they got a fair trial. I don't know about that. Mary reigned for only a short time. She was well past her youth when she became queen, and she was not physically robust or strong. She was probably weak. She died childless in 1558 and was succeeded by her half-sister Elizabeth, daughter of Anne Boleyn. So no tough vocab here, a little confusing, this queen and that guy. And so I just have a, believe it or not, yeah, easy, straightforward questions here because it's confusing. So let me get to the whiteboard. Okay, so just 2 questions here. Easy stuff. Easy. Okay. What was Mary Tudor's nickname? The only hint I'll give you there is think of a cocktail consumed on Sunday for Sunday brunch. Okay, that is your hint for 14. And the last question for this page. You know, I'll be kind. I'll only give you one because I have 2 more important questions on the next page. So on this page, I'll only give you one. Okay, how nice. Teacher is too nice. Okay. So I'll give you a second to answer the one question on this page, 45. And I'll proceed to the very last page. We have one more page and we're done for the day. It should be great. Okay, that's the name of that tune there. Let me go to the eraser. Get rid of this. I know you must be getting tired now. So let me proceed to the last page. And we shall be done. So again, we ended with Anne Boleyn. So here we go. The defeat of the Armada. During the 1500s, England realized that Spain was beginning to reap enormous profits, which means gain, from the New World. The Spanish galleons or ships carried home considerable prizes in monies, jewels, and other treasures. This led to the beginnings of piracy, pirates, right, on the high seas. An English ship would attack a homebound Spanish vessel, murder or capture its crew, and commander the treasure for the queen. The pirates were rewarded for their exploits with a fixed share of the proceeds. Elizabeth even knighted the fearless pirate Captain Francis Drake as a reward for his many successful adventures. Again, nothing difficult in the vocab there. Okay, finishing off this page, or at least this half of it. Hostility had existed between England and Spain for some time. After Queen Mary's death, Philip had attempted to arrange a marriage with her younger sister, but Elizabeth rejected his offer. As a Catholic, Philip was a natural enemy of any Protestant nation. Additionally, he resented Elizabeth's support of Protestant uprisings in France and the Netherlands. On Elizabeth's side, she was displeased over Philip's support of Mary, Queen of Scots, who had attempted to wrest or steal, take, whatever you would like to use, the throne of England from her royal cousin. The Queen's encouragement of piracy against Spanish ships was what finally persuaded Philip to attack England and wipe out its navy. Okay, so let me proceed to the very last part of our reading. Right? And when I finish this, we are done. I'll just ask you 2 questions and c'est la vie. In 1588, the Spanish armed fleet, which means a large group of ships, called the Armada, sailed towards English Channel. The Armada consisted of 130 ships and thousands of soldiers. The fleet looked very impressive and intimidating, but the English Navy was more technologically advanced. So many basic versus fewer but technologically advanced, with ships that were smaller, lighter, better armed, and easier to maneuver. Again, you will see that's a good strategy. The English had set aside a number of ships that were no longer seaworthy, loaded them with explosives, and manned them with skeleton crews, which means very few. In the darkness, the few sailors on board steered each of these ships directly toward the Armada, setting them on fire along the way, and only jumping overboard once the course was set and the ship was well alight or well afloat. When the Spaniards saw these burning ships bearing down on them or coming at them, apparently by magic, they panicked. The formation of the Armada descended into chaos and disorder, as each captain ordered his crew to turn ship and run away. When a fierce storm then came up, the English knew they had won. This battle marked the end of Spanish supremacy in history. So to relate that to something more recent than 500 years ago, the Japanese used a technique called Kamikaze, where they had men strapped into their planes and they would shoot, and then when they were out of bullets, they would just use the plane and kill themselves because they were not allowed to eject, and go straight and use their plane as a bomb and try to take out the ship. So different countries use similar techniques. Okay? So again, we've gone over chaos before. I don't see anything severely difficult here. So let me proceed to the 2 questions, and then we shall be finished for the day. So easy stuff. Long question, short answer. That's how my students like it. Okay, what was the name of the Spanish fleet set to attack England? So look how long my question is, and I'm asking you only for a 1-word answer, right? So again, my funny guys out there, I don't want to see what was the name of the Spanish fleet set to attack England. And you're going to say tostada or taco, right? It's not what I'm looking for here, okay? Okay, on to the last question. And we can finish for the day. Yay. Okay, last question for the day. What marked the end of Spain's supremacy in Europe? So I'm looking for an incident or something that happened that made Spain's supremacy disappear. So again, in a more recent time, during World War II, Hitler and Germany were very strong. But the final thing that happened to them that made them ultimately weak and easy to defeat was when they were defeated by the Russians in Stalingrad. So after that happened, and they took thousands and thousands of prisoners, Germany was never able to recover. They soon after had to surrender to the Russians and the Americans and the Brits. So that happened there. So what happened here with Spain? And then that's it. They were no longer the strongest country in Europe at the time. Okay, so give a few minutes, write these down. What was the name of the Spanish fleet set to attack England? What marked the end of Spain's supremacy in Europe? Okay, so that's it. I hope you have a good time. This is Monday, again, I'm gonna check, 27th. So you should send me these answers by Thursday the 30th. If I get them on Friday, you're late. If I get them Saturday or Sunday, you're absent. Okay? So let's know that. Teacher didn't say anything. Right. 16's gone, 17's gone, and I'm going to end it out. So have a nice week, people. Be good. Okay?